I took my brother off the streets and gave him a job and a home, and now that I've returned from a trip after 2 months of work, I find out he's been with my wife all this time. My brother always had issues with our family. Since he was a teenager, he used to fight with our parents, leave home for months, and then come back, usually completely broken and asking for money. At first, our parents would give him some, but eventually they gave up and banned him from the house. He still came to visit us from time to time, saying he had changed and wasn't the same person as before, but after a day or two, he would become unbearable again, argue with our parents, and run away. This happened several times, and each time our parents accepted him back, until my father finally banned him for good, and when he went there anyway, they called the police on him. During this time, he still tried to contact us regularly, saying he needed help and a place to stay, that he regretted what he had done, and so on. Obviously, we ignored him, but as time went by, I just couldn't leave my brother in that situation. I had bought 2 apartments in my building and was only using one. I had planned to rent out the other, but when I saw my brother on the street while I was on my way to work, I decided to talk to him and give him the apartment, as well as get him a job at a branch of the company where I work. Yes, I know it was a decision I should never have made, but I did it out of love. Everything was fine. I thought he was finally changing, but I was bitterly wrong when I made a trip for 2.5 months to open a branch in another state. My wife doesn't work and stays home all day, so I left her in charge of keeping an eye on my brother to see if he wasn't getting into trouble again. She always said everything was fine, so I never suspected anything. However, about 2 months after I left on my trip, I was released to return home, 15 days earlier than planned. I decided not to tell my wife and surprise her, as I missed her and would have the rest of the week free to spend time with her. So I bought flowers, chocolates, and a perfume she loves, and went home. However, of course, when I walked into the house and opened the door to our bedroom, the first thing I saw was my brother and her together, sleeping in my bed. I had no reaction, I just managed to leave the room and cry, maybe for minutes, for hours. But I decided I wouldn't let it go. I took a picture of them together, took screenshots of her phone, and left the house. When I called his workplace, I found out my wife was lying and he hadn't been going to work for about 2 months, always saying he was sick, and they hadn't fired him yet because I was an important employee in the company and they were giving him a chance. I said they could fire him, and I would sign his dismissal if necessary. In addition, I am officially issuing a notice to evict him from the house I had let him live in, as I had never officially transferred it to him, although I had planned to do so in the future. I have also already spoken to my lawyers, and we will start the divorce process. Neither of them knows about this yet, and it has been about 5 days, and they still think I'm traveling. I know my brother will end up back on the streets, and I know that when they find out what he did, definitely no relative will accept him back, but honestly, I couldn't care less about him. My wife has no money of her own since she never worked and also has no family, so I don't know how she will manage, as we have a marriage in which assets are not divided, so she won't receive a cent from me either, and again, I don't care about her either. The news of all this will reach them today, and when it happens, I will update here. You can now check if there's a part 2 by pressing share and more. I took my brother off the streets and gave him a job and a home, and now that I've returned from a trip after 2 months of work, I find out he's been with my wife all this time. Part 2. Basically, all the news hit them at the same time, and I received numerous phone calls. She asked me why I was doing this, that she thought everything was fine, that she didn't understand. She even asked me the reason behind all of this and if I was seeing someone else, which is quite ironic, considering that the reason for the divorce itself is her being with my own brother. My brother also sent messages asking why I divorced her and saying that she was such an amazing woman. He even asked if, regardless of the divorce, she would still be able to live in my house, as this was important to him since she was helping him with some things. I honestly couldn't believe how shameless he was, and I even wondered if he knew that I had seen everything and was just mocking me. But shortly after, he asked if I knew the reason why he got fired and if I could find him another job, so I figured he didn't know anything. In the divorce court, when my wife found out that I already knew everything, she started crying and begging me for forgiveness, saying it had only happened once. And when the screenshots I had taken from her phone, showing that it had happened much more than once, were shown, she barely reacted. In the end, as I expected, she didn't get anything, and the eviction order from my house was immediate, so she had a little over a day to pack up and leave. On the same day, I delivered the eviction order to my brother as well. At this point, my ex-wife must have already told him that I knew everything, because the first thing he did was kneel down and say he was sorry, that it was her who had convinced him, that he never wanted to betray my trust, and that the house meant everything to him and he couldn't go back to the streets, but I simply didn't react. I just handed him the eviction order, turned around, and said that if he didn't leave within the time estimated by the order, I would call the police. Now, both of them are gone, but they kept calling me constantly for a while. Of course, it didn't take long for me to block both numbers. I know my ex-wife is now living in a shelter, and my brother is back on the streets. Honestly, I don't know how they'll manage, but I don't think it's my problem. I took them in, took care of them, and was betrayed, and what they're going through now is simply the consequence of that. You can now check if there's a part 2 by pressing share and more.